The first thing we wanted to look at was creating content. When you start out with an empty shell and you want to put your course in, you'd come into your course, you'd typically come into what I like to call the starting area, the place where you put your announcements, what the students are supposed to do, and then you'd have them click on content. Typically, you're going to see a big blue button on a lot of screens. That's usually where you want to go for your next step. So we want to add some content. And typically, everything that you do in D2L is going to go into some sort of container. Typically, it's called a module at the larger hierarchy. So I want to start a module. What kind of module shall we start? Should we just call it something generic like creating activities?
We want to do the parent module first, so how about we do learning modules?
Okay, yeah. Well, so this is going to be the big container that is going to hold everything else. And if I could spell, I would be dangerous. You're probably not going to be able to read this in the video, but there will be some other files that you'll be able to follow along with at home that would see the details if you're interested in following along with those. So we basically are just making a container. So we give it a title, and that's kind of like the bucket, and now we want to go into the bucket and put something in it. So let's do that, and as I look around here, again I see this nice big blue button that's kind of through all of this chaos kind of leading me where I need to go. So if I look there, it says new module. Let's put a module for creating activities maybe?
Yep, lesson 1.
Okay, so now I want to put lesson 1 in, but as I do that, it's asking me a question here about a parent module. And for some of you, this terminology and this idea of having to create a hierarchical structure is something that's kind of alien. It's kind of like this program was written by programmers for programmers instead of for educators. And that's where some of the less than convenience and more like frustration comes in. And you'll, again, kind of see that theme running through a lot of my demonstrations where I have to explain some things that have nothing to do with your teaching your class to your students. It's all with how do I get this done? So you don't really have to pay too much attention to that other than to notice that when Nick does the parallel thing in the newer version, that frustration is no longer there. So I can go ahead and say save. And I guess I could have just said save and close. Okay, so now I have a module called Learning Modules, and then in that module I have my Lesson 1 module. And it looks like I could go ahead and just add some more content here. So what kind of...
Let's create a checklist with 4 steps.
Okay, so as I look through here, I could create a checklist as a file, but checklist is an actual type of thing that you can do in D2L, and I just happen to know that, otherwise we'd be starting down a blind alley we'd have to come back from. So if I go up here under, and again, if I don't remember, and I don't remember because my memory is not that great, as I look through here, it's not under communication, and it's not under assessments. There it is under resources. And actually, it's already been created. Should we go through the steps of creating it or just talk about it?
Let's go through the steps because it's very frustrating.
Okay. Let's go ahead and create a new checklist. Let's call it the Lesson 1 checklist. I'm going to call it Revisited because there might be a issue with there being one there with that name already. And I'm just going to put in 4 steps. We don't really care what the steps are for this discussion. This would just be the things that you would have your students do. Okay, so it says it successfully created the checklist. And we're going to go ahead and save that. Okay, so we actually have 2 of them now. So that's fine. But I actually wanted this checklist in Lesson 1. And it's hard to tell at this point where this checklist is. So I'm going to backtrack and go back to content and see where things are. I see my learning module, I see lesson 1, but I don't see my checklist. And as it turns out, I actually have to go back here into lesson 1. And I think quick link is going to be the easiest, most efficient way of getting my checklist in there, because it's a D2L type of thing. It's a resource that's in there. Quick links are what you use to link to things in D2L. Put my quick link in, it will fill in that title for me with the same title that I put on there. But again, if I didn't remember that, I could waste a lot of time filling in those blanks. Now, after I've done this for several semesters, that would become second nature, but our problem has been we typically don't work with the same version of D2L for several semesters for me to get that level of experience before it gets changed. So being that it's written by programmers for programmers, educators typically don't get up to speed as programmers to get fluent with the tool quickly enough, and I'm talking too much. So now I can go ahead and find the checklist, and we're going to use the one with the right name. They're both the same. And insert that, and it went ahead and put the title in there for me, and I'm going to save and close. And that's what it took to get a checklist into Lesson 1 module under the modules list using a quick link.